Hi, and welcome to Four Questions. My name is Magella Almendro, the Client Solutions Manager, and it's great to have you with us today. Today, we've got a very cool guest that's decided to join us. Very excited to introduce you to him. But before we get to that, let's just talk about the world of work today and the fact that it is influenced by technology and how we design and deliver solutions to human needs. Now, one study actually found that 96% of companies plan to redesign the way in which they work, leaning on more digital solutions. So while it's true that investments in digital will matter, there's still plenty of humans running the show, and the way in which we think, our approach to collaboration, and how we innovate will be a big factor in the success of any business. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking to Simon Thomson, Director of the Centre for Innovation and Education at the University of Liverpool. Simon's research focuses on critical digital pedagogy. For those of you unaware of this term, digital pedagogy is the study of the use of digital technologies in teaching and learning. Simon, before we get started, did I even say that right?
Did, yeah, you said it absolutely right, yeah.
It's a bit of a mouthful. Simon, welcome to Four Questions. It's so good to have you here today. Will you just start by telling us a little bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, so obviously I work at the University of Liverpool. I actually started my career in broadcast media, working in the broadcast media sector as a camera operator, editor. So that's where I actually did my undergraduate degree in theatre, so I've got kind of a performance media background. And then I found myself doing more and more teaching part-time in a college, and then full-time teaching, and then I transitioned into higher education, and now ultimately I've been in higher education for 20 plus years. I don't know how many plus years. And so now I moved to the University of Liverpool about 3 years ago to take up the role of the director of this centre.
Wow, I just got to quickly tell you, we've got some alignment because I also used to be in broadcast. So I think we're going to get along really nicely.
I think so, yes.
Okay, great. So let's start with our 4 questions. Simon, you probably get this question all the time, but what is digital pedagogy in a more detailed version, if you could?
Okay, so pedagogy is the term that's broadly used, particularly in higher education, to talk about the science of learning and teaching. So understanding the science behind learning and teaching, the human behaviours behind it, the construction and design of it. So pedagogy is kind of the relationship between the students, the teachers, and the curriculum. When we talk about digital pedagogy, what we're saying is, how do we make use of digital tools in the context of that understanding? And I think one of the things that we found challenging in the sector early on is that technology was always presented as I suppose, a positivist kind of experience. But actually we have to recognise that introducing technologies can have a negative effect on the learning and teaching experiences. So this is the bit, the critical bit. So we talk about digital pedagogy in the sense of, how do we make use of technologies to enhance, for example, learning and teaching experiences, make them more inclusive, for example. But when we look at critical digital pedagogy, it, as is often said, is as much about when not to use technology as it is about when to use technology for learning and teaching. We've been able to effectively undertake learning and teaching practice without a lot of digital technology for hundreds of years. So it's not always a requirement to use digital tools, but we do know they can add something to the pedagogic experience, but also they can detract from it. So the criticality is really around looking at it, exploring at it with a critical lens and saying, no, this is a good way that we can use technology. Perhaps we shouldn't use technologies in these contexts.
I guess it's getting that balance right, because as much as there are pros, there certainly are cons as well, I can imagine.
Yeah, and I think sometimes a lot of technology, especially in the workplace, I think, and even in the context of the work environment in higher education, is forced upon us, isn't it? We find ourselves in work environments where the company has decided the technology that we're going to be using, whether that be the word processing tools that we use, whether that be the communication tools that we use. And I think what's important is we have an understanding of the impact of those digital tools on people's working practices and their own experiences. So I think critical digital application can be applied across sectors. Obviously with us, we're looking at it from a learning and teaching perspective, hence the kind of digital pedagogy lens that we view it through.
So, I mean, you've kind of unpacked it, but if we could dip into a little bit more detail, question 2, what in your opinion does the future of work look like as we have more and more people entering this world environment or work environment that are so familiar and so immersed in technology? I mean, I think of my parents, I think of my in-laws, and it's literally, it's night and day between the world of work then and the world of work now. What, in your opinion, does it look like as we move into the future?
I think the future for me has got to be about agility. We hear the term agile technology, or agile quite a lot, and I think a modern workforce will be more agile. We see that in our students. They don't have so many barriers. They don't feel so many barriers for them in terms of having to adapt quickly to new technologies. If new technologies are introduced, they do tend to be able to pick them up quite quickly. But I think what we have to be careful of is it's not representative of everyone. So although generally we might say students are fairly well immersed in a digital sense, we do know some of our students have what we call digital poverty, which is no access to Wi-Fi or access to poor Wi-Fi infrastructure, or they come from social economic backgrounds where they can't afford the technologies to support them. So that's why we have to be critical about this. And I think what we will see, though, is more broadly with this agility is also a sense of individualism, beginning to get a sense of what individuals need. And I think that will tie in with the kind of move to a hybrid working environment, where we're seeing our staff beginning to make decisions about, when is best for me to be working on campus, in the building, in the office with colleagues, and when actually might I work more remotely using digital tools and technologies. So I think that agility, the ability to adapt and change to technology use, we've seen a huge growth of the use of platforms like Zoom during the pandemic. People have adapted really quickly. They've done some brilliant things in a short amount of time. So I think people are, I suppose, more digitally confident than they were at the beginning, because they've been required to find themselves in that situation. But I also think that it's in a positive sense, it does increase the access to the workplace, to working for certain groups of our society. So if you're a carer, for example, the flexibility of being able to work from home. Some of our students are carers. We know that flexibility of having access remotely is really powerful for them. Obviously, we have students with physical disabilities that it saves them a journey into campus sometimes if we're running things remotely. So I think for me, the future for work and education is about agility, but also about inclusive practice, using technologies to make the workplace and to make education more accessible.
I think the key there is what you said in terms of inclusivity, is because we can't just expect everybody to have this appetite now that we find ourselves in 2021. Everybody's going to have different temperaments towards agility and flexibility, and that's key as well.
Yeah, and I think what this is about the human factor, and there's quite a bit of research around the human factor in relation to technology. There's a really nice article from an article in EDUCAUSE where it talks about this idea of how do we make best use of technology to kind of get rid of the mundane things we do as humans, but actually then it frees up time for the more important human to human interactions. So that, for me, technology should be doing that, shouldn't it? It should be kind of reducing the administrative burden on many of the things that we do, but then freeing up time for us to be able to, in our context, spend more face-to-face time with our students.
So, I mean, I think a lot of us are aware of the pros of digital solutions and technology in the future, but do you think that we also be aware of any cons of this new wave of talent that are so immersed in the use of technology?
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously I will refer back to the digital poverty context. I think we can't make assumptions that everybody is digitally equal. That's the first thing we have to be aware of. So the cons of that, if we make assumptions around people's access to Wi-Fi, for example, or access to laptops, or a setup like we've got today where we're both talking to each other, if we make those assumptions, we can exclude people from experiences, because some people may actually only be able to be physically present in an event or an activity. And if we create an entirely online event, we may be excluding them. So I think there are things that we have to be aware of. Now, this isn't, and I think what we have to be cautious of is never, I suppose, working towards the lowest common denominator, because then we wouldn't be able to improve access or increase availability of some of the work. But we have to be mindful of, when we're creating something, who am I including and who might I be excluding through this process? So digital poverty is one of those things. I also think, and we found this particularly working with staff and students, is I think what we've realized how important the human to human or the person to person interaction is in a face-to-face context. So and even though we're working in a hybrid sense, what we need to make sure is we don't lose sight of the importance of that. It may well be that you and I can do things like this at a distance. You know, this has saved me a visit down to the south of England, hasn't it, from where I am, yeah. Which is great for the environment, which is more flexible for me because I'm not taking a whole day out. But there are times when we actually do want to be in the same space. Yeah. We do want that interaction. And so I think when we design, and we talk a lot about curriculum design, obviously, and we ask our staff to think about the curriculum design and the mode of that teaching in 4 ways. The first way is face-to-face on campus. What are you going to do? Where's the value in that? Face-to-face off campus, because we've got some examples of veterinary and medicine sciences where, you know, students are learning in real-world environments. Then we've got online asynchronous. How can you make use of that asynchronous, flexible material kind of model? And then we've got online synchronous. So it's a mix really of all of those 4. And getting a sense of, yeah, when is it important to be together? When is it important to be online? And when is it important to do things synchronously or asynchronously? And that's the same, I think, in a business context as well. We should be thinking in the same manner. Is when is it important for me to physically meet the client? When is it important for me to remotely meet the client? When is it, you know, so I think we can kind of share some of the experiences we have exploring around learning and teaching and apply them in a professional business context.
That's really interesting, because a lot of the time I think we just kind of leave our teams to their own devices, especially in the hybrid model. And yeah, that's a more conscious way of actually thinking about the intention behind, you know, face-to-face or online. Okay, Simon, last question, question 4. As a leader, what advice do you have when it comes to leading teams in our current and future climate of work?
So I think in the current climate, this is about learning. You know, we're making a transition back into on-campus teaching. From September, we've started the transition back. As of January, so we work in semesters. So semester 2, we'll see a much more increased on-campus presence for our students and also for our staff. So at the moment, what we're trying to do is we're trying to do what I've just talked about, which is work out is when is it best to be on campus. So for example, as a team, what we've worked out is that running workshops with a group of staff works best on campus, because it's difficult to run workshops in online spaces like this because you don't get those informal interactions of colleagues just chatting about something when they've picked up an idea. It's very difficult to suddenly go, oh, hang on a minute, we'll just have a private conversation somewhere else. It's not feasible. So it's about identifying, you know, when is it best to do certain activities. So workshops will be back onto campus. As a leader, my role is to really get a sense check of what the team are feeling, because there are real benefits of staff working flexibly and remotely. You know, from my own department's point of view, I've seen a huge reduction in sickness because the sense that I'm getting when I talk to staff is that the pressure of the commute, the rush to get out the house, to get all the kids ready, to get to work, is being diminished and reduced, and by that very factor they feel more relaxed and their well-being is being improved. So
and also you kind of look forward to the days that you go in, don't you?
Yeah, that's right. And I don't want to lose that, because obviously I've seen a new energy in the team around feeling better about themselves, and then when they come onto campus there's a real hubbub of conversation and catch up, isn't there? So actually what we're doing now is we're kind of indicatively saying, well, let's aim for 20% of our time being in the office on campus, and let's see how that goes as a starting point. How you spend that 20% of the time is actually up to you, but what we want to make sure is you prioritize our stakeholder needs. So in the sense of us, when staff need our support and they want us to be on campus, we should be. So we shouldn't be saying to staff, no, sorry, I don't come onto campus. What we should be doing is saying, right, yes, of course I will, and then I'll use some other time to be off campus. So I think if we can get that balance right, it will increase the productivity of the team and the flexibility and also the well-being. And I think that's critical for me, because in any kind of leadership role, the last thing you want to do is to see staff that aren't happy and not well. And I think what my observations are, through the emergence of the hybrid model that we're working towards now, is an increased sense of self-reflection and well-being. And I think that's a really positive thing that we want to really take forward into the future.
Well, Simon, that's all the time we have for today, but thank you so much for joining us, and thanks for your interesting insights. I mean, translated from education to business, but yeah, I mean, a lot of those dynamics in terms of team management, well-being, it can be translated. So thank you for your insights and thank you for your time.
That's all right. You're very welcome. And it was lovely to chat with you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.